Alright guys, so I've got the 204R out of my Regal just about completely reassembled, and it's been a mess to say the least. I'm not saying this is too difficult for people to do in their garage, but it is time consuming. I was real thorough about it. I did a lot of research, I watched a lot of videos, and I've got two Rebuild 204R books here, and I read those and I read them. And as I'm putting the transmission, I'm going back through step by step in one of the books in particular. So basically tried to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And I'm pretty confident it is together correctly, but you still have that worry in the back of your mind of, is it gonna work? So yeah, I am nervous about it, let me tell you, because that was a lot of work. If this thing don't work right, then you know, I gotta start from scratch again. But anyway, before I put the valve body on, there's several spots in the case that you can air test with your blowgun, with not hardly any pressure, obviously, but you can test to see if stuff engages, and everything was engaging. So technically, it should at least kind of work, I would think. But anyway, I did run into a few issues, so I kind of want to run you through that in case anybody wants to try to do this at home in your garage without the proper tools. When I did this the first time for my Grand National training, I didn't have any of the tools. I didn't even make any tools. I just had a buddy over here. That's actually my cousin, and he helped me get it together. So anyway, I ended up having to make another tool, and it's as redneck gets, but it worked freaking awesome. I made this piece right here. This is a piece of angle, and I used angle because it won't flex. And I cut it to length. I drilled 2 holes in each end, and I'll show you in the parts transmission here. It actually bolts in where your front pump would go to 2 of the bolt holes, one on each side, kind of like that. And then I drilled and tapped that angle, and I put 1/4x20 all thread pieces in there. And I didn't buy any of this stuff. This is just crap I have laying around here. I have tons of different sizes of all thread, like really long pieces, so the stuff was available. But anyway, I just turned these by hand. It didn't really take a lot. It was just too hard to try to do by myself. So this is what you're trying to compress. This is your, I believe it's 4th gear piston. This is technically the piston right here. But this is a little spring pack that goes in there. Now these aren't all that stiff, and you don't got to go a long way. But I tried to do one side by pushing one side down and trying to get the clip started, but it kept popping out on me, and after about 30 minutes I'd had enough. But basically bolted that to the case, and then I used those and just by hand about a half a turn at a time each side, you know, back and forth half a turn until it compressed it enough to get the C-clip in. But anyway, it ended up working out. Another issue I ran into yesterday, this is your 204R filter. And as you can see, this is a problem for them transmissions. If you've ever heard, guys will run them a quart over full to keep them from starving out. Anyway, the reason for that is they pull from the top. This is the top of the filter. So I've always heard to do the 700R4 transmission filter. So I went and bought a kit yesterday, the filter kit, and it pulls from the bottom. So I thought, okay, cool, problem solved. The problem is, when I pulled it out and stuck it up here, this is your difference, height difference right there. Now you have a long reach down in there, so there is enough on here, but what I did was I pulled off this filter, I put that other seal up there just to have, you know, make sure I was getting a seal, and I put it in the trans. So I thought, you know, this is going to be freaking awesome. So I took this tab off the valve body here, and I welded a piece of sheet metal on it, and I bent a little kick in it so it, you know, latched onto that filter, because that filter is a little shorter, and it held it up against everything. So I was like, sweet. So I kind of test fit the pan after that, and the pan won't bolt on. So the 700R filter does not work unless you have a deep transmission pan. So anyway, I did get online and look around at transmission pans, and those things are over $200. So I'm out on that. I'm just going to put a stock filter in it, stock replacement filter and put it a quart over full. So works for me. I am on a budget, if you cannot tell already. Anyway, another thing I ran into, now having that parts transmission was awesome. Mainly, now I did find a bushing, I can't remember whereabouts in the main center of the transmission. Some of these 204Rs came with plastic, there's one right here actually, plastic bushings. And one of these transmissions, I think it was the parts transmission, had a metal one. Well, it's like copper, brass, or something. So I ended up using it and got rid of the plastic in the other one. So that was cool. Now the other cool part was the overdrive clutch assembly. I went through and pulled all the clutches out, or the steels, I'm calling them clutches, but I pulled the steels out of the both overdrive assemblies, and I kind of mixed matched the best ones, and I ended up getting a set of nice ones. So that's pretty awesome. Because these are, phone battery's dying, you can see the charcoal marks on that one. These things got hot. Now a couple of these, it's metal on metal. Two of these made up to each other if I remember right, so that's a reason for it. But I ended up with a nice set of steels. So I used a red Scotch-Brite and just scuffed and scuffed and scuffed and scuffed until they looked pretty much brand new and put it back together. So I'm real happy about that. What else? Another reason, parts transmission. You have your front pump that goes in here. And anyway, so I had extra pump bolts from the other transmission, so I cut the heads off and I cut slots in them for a flathead screwdriver to fit in. This is nothing I seen or read. This is just something I did. But anyway, I put one on one side and one on the other, and that was to guide the gasket on and to guide the pump on, and that worked out freaking awesome. And I'll tell you another thing. If you take a pump apart, because I'd read that some of these have a 10 vein, I think, pump, and some have a 7, and mine, all of them had 7s. You know, both of them had 7s, so that's the reason one of these is taken apart. But anyway, if you take a pump apart, when you go to put it back together, you can't just bolt it on and be done with it. This thing has bigger holes than the bolts are, so you got a lot of slack in there. So when you put it together, just barely snug them up, and then you need to check the fit on the sides. You need to make sure this is even, because if it's offset to one side, that pump will not go into that transmission. Ask me how I know. So anyway, if you do take the pump apart, you know, to upgrade your pump or whatever, or your rotor, whatever that's called, make sure that it is even on the sides where they made up together. The other piece, you know, goes on right here. Make sure that they are even, because that will cause a problem. You can't just bolt that back together and throw it in. It will not work. What else? I'm trying to give you all as many tips and tricks as I can, and it's just from all the videos I watched and the books I read and stuff, and just in case somebody wants to try to rebuild theirs. One of the videos, it's the 2-hour-long video, I think, or nearly 2-hour video on how to reassemble a 204R. It's very thorough video. That's where I got this idea. I got this at Lowe's. And basically it's to get your servo back in. And with this Transgo shift kit, they want you to not put any seals on the piston or the cover, but put it together, because you have to check and see how many shims you can use. If you put them all in at once and you turn this one way and it won't turn the other, you got to pull it back out, take one of the shims off before you, so you know this will turn. When I put them both in, it wouldn't turn one way, so I had to pull it back out and take a shim out. But anyway, what you basically do is I put it barely on the edge, just above the connector right there, right on the edge of the trans, and then this other end went down here on the servo like that, and then just hit the trigger and it sucks it right in there and you can get your clip back in. Another thing I noticed was that clip will go in there, but it really won't be seated all the way. You got to kind of really stick a flat screwdriver in there and just kind of work it all the way around, because if this thing blows out, it makes a loud boom and fluid goes everywhere. Plus, you'll lose some parts, and you'll end up having to spend more money to get another cover. Anyway, so I got that all done and over with, so I'm real happy about that. I do need to do my governor cover. The gasket was severely stuck on this one. The one out of the parts transmission does not have a screen in it. The one out of this transmission has a little mesh screen down the bottom of it. So I don't know why one has it and one doesn't, but I want the mesh screen because they obviously put it in there later for a reason. Because that tranny over there is an 83. This one's an 87, I think. So anyway, I've got it soaking in solvent since yesterday, so hopefully the gasket will just fall off of it now. I hope. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we'll see. Anyway, what else? What else is there? I can show you on the speedometer housing here. Of course, I've already got it in there. Now, you have an O-ring that goes around it on the housing and you put it in. But there's also a little seal on the end there that the shaft goes on. And so if you put a new O-ring on your speedometer housing and it's still leaking, it's coming out around the little seal here. Now, if you've got a little 90-degree hook, you can pretty much reach in there and probably get it out. This one was stuck pretty good, so what I had here was, I have tons of different pick sets. This one had broke off, so I rounded the end of it a little bit, so it's just barely got a little end on it, but I could get it down in through that and use a little mallet on the end, and I knocked that seal out of there. It's actually part of the old seal there. But anyway, that worked out great, so I'm pretty happy. Got all new seals, O-rings, everything, so hopefully the tranny stays dry. And it probably won't, because knowing my luck, it'll leak. It's just, seems like every time I do something, it's always the first shot is practice. You know, it's like I got to have practice to take it back apart and do it again. I don't know. Just terrible that way. Anyway, I guess that's it. Just wanted to give an update and give a few tips that I've picked up from different stuff. I will say this, the Haynes manual that I have here on the 200, this is actually for a lot of transmissions. This is book number 10360, but it covers a lot, the 200, the 400, the 700, and the 350, and it even has some front-wheel drive ones in there, but there is a whole big section on the 204R. They have good picks, and they have good descriptions in there, and it's really, really nice to have that, because there was one part that I couldn't actually remember which way something went, and I ended up using it. It worked out great, and they have little notes in here, and it gives you tolerances and stuff like that. So pretty cool stuff. But I cannot stress enough how good having that parts transmission was here, because I got to kind of use a couple of steels, you know, for the overdrive clutch assembly that were nice. So I ended up, all the steels I have are nice in this tranny. So anyway, and then, you know, you get confused on a piece, you got another tranny to look at or something. So go for transmission, I guess. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I'm going to cover. That's all I can cover, really. So anyway, hopefully maybe another full day or another maybe 2 days, I'll have the damn thing back in the car and be able to test it. So I'll do a video with the camera mount in there and go for a test drive and see how it shifts. I hope it knocks my head off when it goes in gear. That'd be kind of nice.